Um, all right, let me see if I can get this to start up. Okay, I'm going to give you some facts about Michigan. Number one, Michigan has a population of about 10.2 million. That's quite a few people, actually. But here's the thing that's really spectacular about it. It has nearly 3,000 miles of shoreline, nearly as much as Washington State or Virginia. And I think actually the state with the most in the lower 48 might be Maine. I'm not sure if it's Maine or Florida. Maine has all those little places that go in and out, so there's a lot of shoreline. But Michigan, who's a long ways from either ocean, is 3,000 miles of shoreline because it borders 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. The only one it doesn't touch is Lake Ontario. There it is, in case anybody's wondering where it is. And I'll tell you what I've learned about why Michigan has an upper peninsula and lower peninsula. There's another map of it showing a little more detail that Interstate 75 goes all the way up to the upper peninsula. So they call this the UP or Upper Peninsula. And what's the term they use for people from the Upper Peninsula? Uppies, yuppies, yippies. What is it? Youpers. See, and that's why I have people from Michigan to help me with this. Youpers. They're from the Upper Peninsula, which if you look at, it looks like it ought to be attached to Wisconsin. Wisconsin has its own thumb. This is the Door Peninsula. I've been there. That's a beautiful place. So I can imagine all the rest of this is equally beautiful. In fact, I'm imagining that these Upper Peninsula of Michigan, this peninsula coming down here, and Door Peninsula, some are part of the same landmass. Anyway, well, let's go back to this Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula thing here. The story I got reading the history, and this was in a book, not on the internet, is that when Michigan was forming or applying to join the Union, and I'll tell you about when that happened in a second, there was a dispute over some of the lands around Lake Erie and specifically Toledo, Ohio. And Michigan didn't get Toledo, but Michigan got the Upper Peninsula. That's true. Now, we all have to remember that there were people there before that. It joined the Union in 1837, and the capital is Lansing. It has the 3rd largest number of lakes in the lower 48 with over 11,000, which, by the way, is more than Minnesota has. So somehow they got to be called Land of Lakes or Land of 10,000 Lakes, but actually Michigan has more. In the early 19th century, it was thought to be a swampy wasteland. So when the white settlers first came to it, and there were quite a few native tribes there, it was actually just heavily wooded. The idea that it was a swampy wasteland was one of those, I understood, was one of those ploys to keep people away. But because it's got all those lakes like this one, and this is a Klinger Lake in Sturgis, Michigan. The big thing in Michigan is a lot of people have lake houses. Very common. People talk about their house on the lake, and
all of them are from Chicago.
That's over in South Haven. Those are all from Chicago.
Well, I'm talking about the little lakes. They're talking about they have little lake places. I can believe the Chicagoans have got the lake shore. I can imagine that. Yeah. They're talking about their little house somewhere on a little lake somewhere on one of those 11,000 lakes in Michigan. Anyway, this is a postcard from about 100 or more than 100 years ago. I thought that was pretty quaint. I like that motorboat. So anyway, that's the brief history of Michigan. There were native tribes there, quite a few, and they got along pretty well with the French, who came there first. They were the first Europeans to come. Didn't get along as well with the British. Did not get along at all well with the Americans after the Revolution. That's what I read in the history book. But let's leave history and talk a bit about today in Michigan. And I enjoy this comment from Cindy. Says uppers call yuppers. What was it again? Youpers? Youpers call people who live in the Lower Peninsula trolls because they live under the bridge. I think I've heard that somewhere. Someone in Michigan told me that. I have a lot of coworkers, by the way. I have some coworkers from Michigan. So the first place I put, so these are, now I'm going to talk about destinations in Michigan. I got about 20 places, It is a state with 10.2 million people, beautiful places to see. I will not cover them all. So you all can tell me about more. That's no problem. I picked some out myself. And as I've taught this class, Michiganders have said, you need to talk about this, you need to talk about that. So anyway, I should say that one little fact about Michigan having so much lumber, the first big industry was lumber. Sorry, having all those forests, the first big industry was lumber. And near some city, I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was Muskegon. Anyway, some city like 100 years ago, there was a pile of sawdust that was like 40 feet high and a mile long. That's how much milling of lumber they were doing. Anyway, I suspect it's gone. Anyway, what I first knew about Michigan was this fabulous place called Warren Dunes State Park. So state park, not national park. It has dunes over 250 feet high and is a destination for hang gliding. I didn't get a picture of a hang glider here, but even way back in the 70s, when I was escaping Chicago to go over there for the day with my buddies, and we had a car and we could drive, there were people hang gliding up in the early to mid 70s. And we thought Warren Dunes was so cool because it was kind of like going to the ocean. Sometimes there were even waves that were like 2 feet high, and it was really nice swimming. By the way, you had to pass by Indiana Dunes, which recently became a national park. Did you know that? I didn't know that till I started teaching a class on the national park. Anyway, Warren Dunes is down in the southwest corner along the lake, and it is a great place. Really fun to go to. A little bit farther north, up the coast. Let me just show you. Let's look at a map here for a second, everybody, because we got to remember what we're talking about here. See, Michigan has got half of the coast of Lake Michigan. So this is Lake Michigan. And then the Upper Peninsula is surrounded by Lake Michigan. This is Lake Huron over here and Lake Superior. And of course, Isle Royale is up here, and that's part of Michigan. And then down here, it borders Lake Erie. So when we're talking about this whole western coast of Michigan is all Lake Michigan. So we'll just keep that in mind when I talk about going up there. So that's a lot of coastline to cover. But I read in a book, because I read a book about this, and people who came to the class agreed that Grand Haven is one of the best beach towns. And it was elected in some year recently the best beach town that's not in the ocean in the U.S. That's not in the ocean. Okay. That's the lighthouse. We went the wrong direction. If we keep going north, we come to more dunes, Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore Ski. So this is the national park system. And Sleeping Bear Dunes has dunes that are even bigger than the ones in Warren Dunes. I think they're like 650 feet high or something like that. They're spectacular. And there's also these islands out here in the middle. And by the way, if any of you have never been up to the Great Lakes area, Wisconsin, Michigan, it really is beautiful. Like I said, I used to go up to the Door Peninsula when I was a teenager and just fell in love with the place. So there's an island out here, and this little story that the Indians called the big dune here was the mother bear, and then the islands out here were the baby bears. Anyway, all these dunes along the western shore of Lake Michigan were left from a glacial deposit when the glaciers receded from North America back up into Canada, where they are now up in northern Canada. They left behind these big piles of sand, and they were formed over thousands of years into these dunes. And they're now covered with vegetation. And Sleeping Bear Dunes is quite a place where you can go, and it's National Seashore. So if you've got National Lakeshore, you've got one of those lifetime senior passes, you can get in there for free, and you can